This is the video lecture covering Lesson 15 in Clayton Croy's A Primer to Biblical Greek. In this lesson, we will discuss the perfect active indicative, as well as the perfect middle passive indicative and the pluperfect. Just a reminder of the principal parts. Remember, principal parts are those basic forms of a verb from which all other forms can be made. And so in Greek, there are 6 principal parts, and in today's lesson, we will be discussing the perfect active indicative and the perfect middle passive indicative. To begin with, what is the perfect tense? Well, there are 2 important foci of the perfect tense. The perfect tense denotes past time action that has effects into the present time. So there's that 2 foci, past time and effects in the present. So an example would be, I was baptized. Well, that's a pretty simple past. You might say, I was baptized on January 2nd, 1984. An example of the perfect would be, I have been baptized. The perfect tense here suggests that it's not only a simple event in the past, but it's an event that has a lasting significance in the present. Sometimes the perfect tense will be translated with a present tense form of the verb to be. So, it has been written could also be translated as it is written, or you have died could also be you are dead. Either of those, if you were translating the Greek, would be appropriate and acceptable. Perhaps one or the other would be more appropriate given the context, but both of them are possibilities. So here is the chart for the perfect active indicative, and you can see the 6 forms have been laid out nicely for you. I've put the markers of the perfect tense there in the brown font. So, leluka, I have loosened. Lelukas, you singular have loosened. Leluken, he, she, or it has loosened. Lelukamen, we have loosened. Lelukate, y'all have loosened. Lelukasin, they have loosened. There is also a form of the perfect active infinitive, which is lelukenai. Again, as has been the case with previous lectures on different verb forms, there's a few more notes about the perfect active indicative. First of all, you'll see, based on the brown font, that there are 2 characteristic markers. First of all, there is reduplication, which is when the first consonant and an epsilon are added to the verb stem. So in this case, le. The second characteristic is the suffix ka that you see in all the forms, although the alpha drops off in that third singular. And so the personal endings, other than the third plural, are very similar to the endings of the aorist tense. Now here is the chart of the perfect middle passive indicative. Lelumai, I have loosened for myself. Lelusai, you have loosened for yourself. Lelutai, he, she, or it has loosened for himself, herself, or itself. Lelumetha, we have loosened for ourselves. Leluste, y'all have loosened for yourselves. Leluntai, they have loosened for themselves. There is also a form of the perfect middle passive infinitive, lelustai. Once again, just a few notes about the perfect middle passive indicative. You can see that the middle and the perfect are identical in form, so that's why I've used the slash between middle and passive above. You'll see that there is reduplication as there is in the perfect active, but unfortunately there is no ka suffix. You'll also notice that the middle passive endings are joined directly to the verb stem. There is no variable vowel or connecting vowel. And so as a result of adding the endings right onto the verb stem, there may be some slight changes with the final form of the perfect middle passive indicative. But generally, those consonant changes won't slip you up as you are reading Greek and interpreting Greek. All right, so just a few words about not-so-perfect reduplication. Remember, reduplication is typically the first consonant plus an epsilon before a verb stem. There are some exceptions, or there are some oddities with reduplication. The first is, obviously, with verbs that begin with a vowel, there isn't a first consonant. And so when you reduplicate that first letter, that first vowel, what results is a lengthening, and it ends up looking a lot like the augment for the imperfect or for the aorist. When you have verbs that begin with phi, theta, or chi, reduplication results in a changed consonant, pi, tau, or kappa, and then you add also the epsilon. And then verbs that begin with psi, zeta, or xi, reduplication is essentially adding an epsilon before the stem. Again, very similar to the addition of the augment as in number 1 above. And finally, there are other verbs that reduplication will be totally unpredictable. So we're going to need to use our dictionaries or the glossaries or other resources to determine the verb that is being used. Finally, just a brief note about the perfect tense. As Croy points out, it's not common in Biblical Greek. It's important for you to know where to find that chart in section 104, but you don't have to memorize it. And just so you know, the perfect tense denotes action that was completed sometime prior to a point in past time. So, for example, I had loved Greek before I watched this lecture. All right, as has become our custom, let's get started with a practice review exercise. And this one is number 2. I've chosen it because it gives us a few more perfects to work with and is a good example for us to discuss together. So, akekoate tu prophetu, lawas lege hate eleluthen, apotu uranu autu. We will begin by bracketing off prepositions and genitive phrases. At this point, or in this exercise, we only have one, apo tu uranu autu, so we can bracket that off to know that we can sort of deal with it once we've identified other aspects of the sentence. And then we'll want to identify the verbs. And so that the first verb that we see is the first word of the sentence, ake koete. And as you can see, I've tried to separate it out. You'll see the reduplication there with ak at the beginning. And then the ate ending indicates that these are the second person plural endings for the perfect tense. So we would parse this as perfect active indicative from akuo. The next verb that we see is lege. And we've seen this so much in past lessons that I'm just going to parse it for you. Present active indicative third singular, he, she, or it says. And then finally we have eleluthen, which is one of your vocabulary words for this lesson. But again, I've sort of tried to show you some of the markers that indicate that what tense it is and what its person and number are. And so you see L at the beginning is an example of some reduplication. I know it seems a little strange. It's one of those very strange instances of reduplication. And then the N ending there is an indication of the third singular ending. So we would parse this as perfect active indicative third singular from erchomai. So notice that erchomai was a deponent in the present, and here it becomes just a regular active in the perfect active indicative. And then with those verbs in mind, we would then look for the subject and the other parts of the sentence. And so once we've looked at all of those different parts of the sentence, we would offer a translation, something like, have you all heard the prophet? The crowd is saying that he has come from heaven itself. So just to note again, tu prophetu is in the genitive case. It's in the genitive case because it follows that verb akuo, which sometimes takes the genitive for its definite article. And you see that apo tu uranu autu is a long prepositional phrase. Tu uranu is in the genitive case because it follows apo, and autu is a genitive because it modifies heaven. It is one of those special uses of autos that we learned about in a previous lecture. All right, that is the end of this video lecture on lesson 15. Thank you for your attention.